Welcome back. Now that we've created the pipeline to transform the taxi zone file, let's look at processing the other files, and let's assume that we want to start with the calendar file. Calendar is similar to taxi zone file. It's a CSV file that we need to transform to Parquet format. If you look back at the design for the taxi zone pipeline, you will realize that the components which are specific to the taxi zone file are the pipeline, with the two activities and the data set. In order to process the calendar file, we can create another pipeline pointing to another data set a specific for the calendar file. The link services can be reused as they are just pointing to the storage account and the SQL pool rather than the specific data related to one layer taxi zone. At the end of this, we will have two pipelines and two datasets. With this approach for the 7 files we have in this project to process, we will have 7 pipelines and 7 datasets, and that's a lot of assets to maintain for such a small project. Let's look at other options. Another option is to keep one pipeline with the activities duplicated. This means we will have one pipeline with 14 activities as well as 7 different datasets, and that's a lot to maintain as well. In order to make this situation better, Synapse Pipelines offer something called parameters. The concept parameters is very similar to that of other programming languages. Let me walk you through the parameters that are available in pipelines, datasets, link services, and data flows. Via the parameters, you can pass values from one component to another. For example, if you created a pipeline with a parameter, a trigger or another pipeline can send a value at runtime. When calling that pipeline, the value of the parameter being sent cannot be changed inside the pipeline or any other component. The main benefit of using parameters is that you can reuse the component by sending a different value each time it is being called. In our example, we can create one data set with the parameter, and we will pass the different path value for each time it is being called rather than creating 7 different data sets. So in our example, we will be sending taxi zone during the first execution. Next we will send calendar during the second execution, etc. So you end up having one pipeline, one dataset rather than 7 different datasets. With our understanding, we can redesign our pipeline to this. Firstly, we can create a dataset with folder path as the parameter. Rather than having a dataset pointing to the taxi zone folder, we'll then add a variable to the pipeline to hold the value of the folder. But again, the concept of variables are very similar to the other programming languages. You can only create variables in pipelines. The difference between parameters and variables is that unlike parameters, the value of the variable can be changed at runtime. Synapse Pipelines offer a set of variable and then append variable activity. If you are interested in learning more about variables, I would recommend to check out the Microsoft documentation as well. So once we've created the variable, we can then pass the value of the folder path variable to the delete activity. It can then pass that value to the parameter in the dataset. Similarly, we can have a variable to keep the stored procedure name and pass that to the stored procedure activity so that it's not hard-coded either. Once these changes are made, we don't need the 7 different datasets and we just need one. But I appreciate that we haven't eliminated the need for the 7 pipelines, as we are not coding the folder path and the stored procedure names in the pipeline variables itself. We'll deal with that later. But in the next session, let's make these changes first.